So welcome, everyone. My name's Tom Cargill. I'm the Chief Executive of Wilton Park, which is an executive agency of the British Foreign Office, but we are academically independent. We're very fortunate in that we don't have to toe the UK policy line, and we actually get to support objective discussion by politicians, business people and diplomats from around the world to address some of the world's biggest challenges. And I'm very pleased to be here today for this conversation on Libya with Her Excellency the Foreign Minister of Libya and His Excellency the Foreign Minister of Algeria. And two other guests. We've got Anas Al-Gomati from the Sadeq Institute, based in Tripoli, right? And Jonathan Powell, who's the CEO of Mediate, which is a charity on conflict prevention globally. But perhaps most notably for this conversation was the UK Prime Minister's envoy to Libya in 2014. Now we have, I think, around 50 minutes, yes, to discuss where things are in Libya today and a way forward. All of our esteemed guests are far more expert than I, but as many of you will know, Libya has made slow but steady progress in recent years. From the tragedy of the two civil wars back to 2011. But it has been very difficult, stop-start, fraught, so many negotiations. And just when many thought that it might be possible to elect a new parliament and president in December at the end of last year, those elections in fact did not go ahead. So we still have the internationally recognized government in Tripoli, but also the other government in Benghazi, and a disagreement between the two really about the way things should proceed from here. In terms of how we're going to run today, I thought we don't want long set-piece speeches, but if we can run things as a conversation, and I will ask some questions from our panel, we'll run things like that. We may not have time for questions from the audience at the end, but if we can, I will try and squeeze some in. But if we turn first to you, Minister, and thank you so much for joining us today, both of you, incredibly appreciated. Could you perhaps give us a little, a short summary of where has Libya got to now? Now we're in March, 4 months now since the elections did not take place. What is the current situation and where do you think things should go from here?
شكرا لكم على الدعوة الكريمة. اسمحوا لي بادئ أن أشكر القائمين.
To thank all those who have organized this meeting. I'm very happy to be a part of this, and I would like to salute His Highness the Emir for his sponsorship and guardianship and for all the effort. I also salute my colleague and my friend Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman for his work in which he has gained the fruits of, in a way that this forum has become an international, worldwide forum, and the participation in it is developing more and more to the better every year, and is distinguished by this big number of well-experienced and wise men, women, and those who follow the events and who can be useful and benefit from the discussions of the forum. Given the fact that this edition of the forum is being held in a changing world because of the war in Ukraine, I think it's very important now that we also take the lessons from and learn some lessons from this and be ready, in fact, to learn some lessons from what's going on to benefit from one issue and the other. And here I must also think of the Libyan issue, which has been difficult to solve by the Libyans and the international community for a long time. It's not a short time, in fact, and it's a high time now that we study and analyze what happened and the way the Libyan has been with for the 10 years on what happened of the government being presented the Najlaa. So we in Algeria, we think that we are close to, geographically close, historically close, and culturally close to Libya, and we also emotionally we are very close to Libya, and thus we consider that we have a common destiny. Nevertheless, we think that the Libyans know their situation better than us, so it is best for us to benefit from the Libyans themselves before being bold to give ideas about or to give advice to them. Nevertheless, and as you have given me the privilege to be the first speaker, I will be bold enough to give some remarks in form of participation in putting the headlines of the discussion of this session after the presentations, especially the presentation by my colleague Najlaa. In the beginning, I would like only to say that being the international group has focused on the project of elections on 24th of December in a way that it seemed as if there is no way of thinking of any alternative or anything else. In such a way that the international group and the Libyans, in fact, before them, have not been able to organize these elections in the specified date. This has made everybody feel frustrated, a sort of frustration, and forgetting or pretending to forget that Libya did actually make progress on different levels, and that it was important for us. Instead of being frustrated, we should think about the failures and to learn the lessons from that in order to be able to go to the next period or to the coming stage, because losing the opportunities and losing the efforts that were made and the achievements that were might have negative repercussions on the future of Libya. On this, because of this, we have considered say that the failure means that we must learn the lessons from this so that we don't repeat the same mistakes. We must do our best to improve our performance, take lessons from the outcome of the Berlin, and also hoping that we can work together and to listen to our brothers and sisters from Libya to tell us what do they think is fruitful and what is best to be done. I think my time is over, so to be well disciplined, I give the floor to my colleagues so that they can enlighten us with more information that will be useful for us all.
Thank you, Excellency. That was very good timekeeping. And for you, Foreign Minister Al-Manqush, could you give us your thoughts on where things have got to and where next?
First of all, thank you. I really like the title of the session, Building Stability and Peace in Libya, and I think this resonates a lot with the goal behind this government. As we know, this government is the birth of the political agreement. Berlin 1, Berlin conference, and Libya stabilisation conference was successful after years. Foreign minister, and it was really a milestone for us to post event as that we belong to this agreement, that we support Libya, and that is the priority. So that was another also the idea Libya to know the as mentioned. If you small correction, the government is not in Benghazi. The idea is this government has been appointed by the parliament as a way to create new transitional interim government. That was for us surprise because the main goal for this government was to handle the power to elected government. So things went to different direction suddenly, and I think we are very keen to have election as soon as possible because I think this is the only solution for Libya. We want parliament election and presidential election. And why this, I will say, because parliamentary election, because we don't even know what's the shape of the state. We don't know Libya will be a republic or will be kingdom or will be, we don't have even the basic constitution that we can build on in order to reach to that level. So my concern, there is a lot of international community, they're really ignoring the fact that we don't want to jump, to the result without paving the way toward more sustainable election. You have to build at least some basics so we can build on this. And I think the UN now effort is to resonate with the same thing, that we need to work together toward creating constitutional base that will help to have election as soon as possible, and then also to lead the country by elected government. We are done with transitional and with interim government. We have been for so long that affect economical development, political development, stability in the region as well. And we come as who represent the country to lead it to election, stage, which is the dream of all Libyans. We have more than 2 million have been registered as voters for election. So why we lose the momentum? Why we lose the international commitment? Why we lose what has been achieved so far? As you mentioned, there is some baby steps achievement. I'm not claiming we are the perfect government, but we are acting of a long history of legacy, of division, of corruption, of different different stakeholders who not necessarily agreed in the future of Libya. And then, so we really have very challenging tasks with limited budget. There is no budget, actually. We don't even has budget. And then with the trust withdrawal in last September, we have a lot of challenges. But I really like the sentence that Sheikh Mohammed mentioned this morning, the Qatari's foreign minister, which I really appreciate, and I cherish the relationship between both of us. He said, very wise sentence. Countries in transition, they're facing crisis all the time. And I see this current moment is a crisis that require Libyans to come together and sit together and discuss the future of their country. We don't want any war anymore. We have been going so far since the ceasefire, and we want to build on this. We don't want to go to square number one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Foreign Minister. That was very powerful, and I think it is remarkable how the people of Libya have managed to pull back from the brink, from that terrible time up until 2020. It's not easy for a country to arrest that that cycle, and Libya has achieved that much so far, and that's got to be something worth a lot. Jonathan, if we come to you now, you were the UK Special Envoy at this particular time in 2014. In terms of what you hear from Foreign Minister Manqush, what are the themes that seem different to you from when you were looking at it, and what seems kind of similar in terms of your perception of where things are now?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. And I start by apologising for being the most ignorant member of the panel. It was a long time ago that I was the envoy in 2014 to 16, along with David Satterfield from the US, and in fact Sheikh Mohammed at that time, who was the Qatari envoy. So we worked together on the subject. So it was a long time ago, but I do work on conflicts around the world, and I've seen a lot of successful peace processes and a lot that have failed. So I just want to touch on 4 things very, very briefly. The first is, when I went to Libya in 2014, I thought, academics say you solve a problem when there's a mutually hurting stalemate, and that's the only time you can get to peace. I went to Libya and I thought, oh good, there's a stalemate. We'll be able to get to peace. But I was mistaken. It was not a mutually hurting stalemate. People could make more territory, make more money, and there was not the consensus on getting to peace that you need to have in these circumstances. And the question I asked myself, because I still follow very closely Libya, because I care about it and I really do want it to succeed, I wonder still if we have yet got to that mutually hurting stalemate on all sides that will enable us to make peace. Secondly, I agree with what the Foreign Minister said, that if you want a sustainable peace, the thing I observed in Libya was we had elections, but the winner-takes-all approach to elections makes it very difficult to get to a sustainable peace in Libya. And we had that same thing in Northern Ireland. For 90 years, there were elections, but they were always won by the Protestants, and the Catholic never had any power. And they would not accept that that was the way it was. So I think we have to think about power sharing as well as elections if you're going to be successful and have a sustainable peace in Libya. The other thing I observed was that it's not always a good idea to rush against the Foreign Minister said in these circumstances in Libya. Making it mindful isn't always the right conditions. Constitution. If you get to a series where people know what they're being elected to do, can do what they are elected. And lastly, when I went to work, what everyone said to me was, thank you for supporting us during, when did you go away and leave us with no help building institutions? And what we did was we took the wrong leg, so intervening there and just to sort was not a sensible approach. We should have helped on the institutions. We should help now on the institutions, because it's only if you can build lasting institutions you will get lasting peace, and I think that is crucial. But I just end by saying that one bit of optimism I think we can all feel is that at least it hasn't gone back to war. The war has ended, and let's keep it that way. That seems to me the crucial thing that we must do.
For sure. Thank you, Jonathan. And leading actually very nicely on from that, Anas, from your perspective, your think tank works a lot on Libyan issues. What do you think should happen next? Because of course the Foreign Minister put forward that position that we need to move to fresh elections and move forward that way. But of course there's another perspective out there that actually this requires more of a revisiting of the constitutional framework and more of a consensus approach forward. What's your perspective on the way forward from here?
Thank you. I'll say thank you to the Doha Forum for the organising this session, and to yourselves at Walton Park also for organising this and inviting us here. I'd also like to thank my fellow panellists and distinguished guests also for coming to make the time today. It's a great question. I think when you're looking at the, when you're kind of picking through the debris of this latest kind of political wreckage and crisis, because there is a crisis, and the Foreign Minister herself has put her finger on this button, we have to start asking ourselves why, and it leads us to more profound questions. What is the conflict about in Libya? And what should we do about it? Because we're asking a question about stability. What is stability? It's about learning to live together with your neighbor, whether your neighbor is down the road or whether it's across the country. These are profound questions, and they're simple questions. Now, when we look at the architecture of a lot of the conflict dynamics that even Jonathan has spoken about the mediations, the solutions, we've seen aspects here that try to describe the conflict. We can see that in the solution. We had a 9-man presidency at one point, and the idea was bring everyone in and feel left out, and we'll stop fighting. It's all agreed. Everyone's fighting. If that was the case, we split the money a long time ago, and they would have settled this. If it was about East, West, and South, then again, we would have stopped this conflict many, many years ago, 2014. We might have even stopped it in 2019, but I think we have to move away from these ideas that it's personalities, and we have to move towards a structured approach. And I think this idea of moving towards elections, and I think the minister herself has mentioned this, that we need to have an end to the transitional period. And we have to ask ourselves important questions. Where are we going, and what do we want to achieve? And what do we want to achieve through elections? I think when I'm picking through the debris, I realize some quite alarming aspects to what's happened. Libya is covered in crime scene tape. We should remember that. Yes, the conflict has ended, but the wounds are still there. And I think rewarding, and this has been the main challenge, rewarding members of the international community with the custodianship of the state-building process in Berlin 1, and that was Germany's badge of neutrality, the UN's badge of neutrality. We are not living in that world anymore. We are living in a multipolar world. Don't ask a Libyan, ask a Ukrainian. They'll tell you. We're not living in a world where the UN Security Council alone may have the tools to fix that. And we have to ask ourselves what kind of world, what kind of vision we have for that, because Libya is right caught in the middle of that tide. And so again, when I go back to Berlin, Berlin was not just about elections. It was not just about elections. But the Berlin process in January 2020, a few months before the pandemic, was a state-building process. And we've forgotten and neglected that aspect. These elections and the way they were being called for were under conditions that maybe were a stalemate, but the very actors that were responsible for the conflict, the very actors that, irrespective of the 8-month mandate of the GNU, this current government, have been around for 8 years, in fact, 10 years. Those institutions have throttled democracy. They have started conflicts, and instead of being held responsible for them, have been rewarded with custodianship of setting forward the roadmap. That in itself is a vicious and heinous crime. It should not be able to continue. And we should remember that we should remember, and that is what's happening in Libya. Because in 2015, we saw running around and assassinating people. And being shipped from Libya, we're not living in a siloed world. We're living in a world that is very much interconnected. If I was to put forward ideas about what we should do, we should remember that you build a state through structures, not slogans. And you build it through programs, not just the idea that we may have elections under any conditions, conditions that may just throttle democracy. For me, I'll mention this final aspect. A parliamentary democracy is important because, as you were saying, Jonathan, this idea of a winner takes all is a bad, bad aspect, a bad future to move to when everyone has got literally a Mexican standoff, guns at the ready. Yeah, they might not be fighting, but the guns are still there. They haven't moved. A parliamentary democracy allows for consensus. And you need to move forward with consensus because the conflict hasn't yielded any fruit. So I would say, putting this forward, don't lose sight of the state-building project. The very actors that have throttled democracy through these structures, whether it's holding institutions and creating conditions and setting the rules of the game that are not free and fair. And secondly, the structures that are responsible for conflict, where there is a stalemate but are still armed, they need to go. And absolute measures, that's black and white. They need to go, and the international community has a responsibility. I know that Libyans have made mistakes, and I'm sure they'll continue to make mistakes, but it's not their fight alone. The international community has to step up and take its responsibility. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Anas.